Reed and Robert Saleh.
Oh, I'm sure they will. I mean, and as you mentioned, I mean, that is one of the Chiefs' favorite formations of just in general, leaving Kelsey isolated as basically as a wide receiver on one side and then 2 to 3 receivers on the other side. There's so much they can do with that. Kelsey's a matchup problem on his own, and then you have to deal with a couple of speed guys on the other side. It's just a really good way of manipulating things, and it's something they always test defenses with early in the game, and just to see what they do. Because most teams come into a defensive game plan saying, okay, we got to double Tyreek, or we got to do this or that. And so once defenses show their cards in terms of how they plan to deal with specific weapons that the Chiefs have, then they adjust to that. And so I think it's going to be a really fascinating matchup in general. And you mentioned, again, like a part of this formation, a big key of that is just Travis Kelce, being this really difficult guy to cover and figuring out who you want to assign to him.
Yep.
And it's interesting. I played tight end in high school when I played football. And so it's a position that's near and dear to my heart. And I think it's great that the Super Bowl features probably the two best, well, actually, undisputably, the two best tight ends in the game right now.
Absolutely.
And it was interesting. PFF did kind of a breakdown on this in terms of like comparing Kittle and Kelce. And essentially they came down, like, in terms of their grade, like who won in each category. It was like basically Kelce won in almost all the receiving categories. Kittle won in all of the blocking categories. But their like final grade, their final, I guess, verdict was that Kittle was the best tight end in football.
Best overall player per PFF. Best overall player 2019, George Kittle.
And so I don't know. I have no idea how you guys plan on covering Kelce. I think it's going to be incredibly difficult to figure out Kittle. But, talk a bit about how Kittle, is an engine in your offense, why he's the best tight end and why you're wrong about that.
Yeah, the Dwight Stevenson PFF award winner, George freaking Kittle. And I imagine you feel the same way about Kelce. He's the exciting heart and soul of the team. The Niners' first loss against the Seattle Seahawks, Week 10. They still almost won that game, but no George Kittle. They have Kittle. They win that game, and I really see that they could be looking closer to an undefeated season. He's the heart and soul on third downs. The matchup that I am just absolutely chomping at the bit, and we could talk more in a second, is Honey Badger versus Kittle on third down. I cannot wait for that matchup. Buda Baker had a nice little coming of age party versus Kittle on both sides. So we'll see. Similar player. But yeah, Kittle, his run blocking really can't be understated. It cannot. And that is the reason why he's the better player. If you want to find out where the Niners are running, just look at George Kittle. Maybe you got to look at Kyle Juszczyk, but really it's all about George Kittle. And every defensive coordinator in the league knows that. The Minnesota Vikings knew that. Mike Pettin and the Packers knew that. And they got absolutely boat raced. And so will Steve Spagnuolo and Chris Jones and Dee Ford, will they be ready to hold the edge versus George Kittle? Or maybe they'll over accentuate the edge like the Packers did, and then the Niners beat them on inside zones and power and traps like they did that game. And so like you said, when it comes to the Chiefs run game, they are absolutely they struggle versus the run game and the outside zone. They're 26th in the NFL versus defending that. And that's what the Niners love to run. So I could see the Chiefs really accentuating that outside zone, potentially setting up Jimmy G for some play action. And if you're constantly trying to bracket Kittle, I can see wide receivers getting open. But back to that. Yeah, tell me about Travis Kelce. Why do you think somehow PFF is wrong and I am wrong? Go ahead.
Well, I mean, so first, just on the Kittle thing, I actually think that's going to be one of the more fascinating things just to follow in the game as a matchup standpoint. I don't think it's going to be Honey Badger on him all the time,
no.
Even though that might be the more obvious thing. I mean, he's obviously our best safety, especially with Juan Thornhill injured, but
just mainly on third downs. Like the Niners love to throw to Kittle on third and long. I could see the Honey Badger being man-on-man with him, but I don't know. Then again, George Kittle's bigger. So, yeah, what do you think?
Right. I mean, the size thing there is huge. And although, like, Honey Badger, he's Honey Badger. He has that nickname for a reason. Like,
yes.
He somehow, can body out like dudes much larger than him and plays much bigger than his size. But still, I just feel like even more than that, he's been such an important piece of this defense because they play him everywhere. I mean, in the course of the game, sometimes in the course of a single play, they will, they'll fake blitz him. He'll drop into one zone, then he'll go cover some other guy. And sometimes they just leave him just to be a robber and let everybody play assignments and just let him try to figure out what he thinks is happening and be in the right place. And so I think any game plan that where they're going to say like, okay, this is how we're going to eliminate Kittle, Tyrann Mathieu, you're on him. I don't think they're going to do that, and I would hope they don't, because I think that eliminates a lot of the flexibility in the way that they play defense. But I don't know what other answer there is, honestly, because Kittle's a man, and I think it's going to have to be a combination of players on every play, but it's going to be different, I think, every time because they want to maintain that flexibility. On Kelce, though, I mean, I think Kittle's crazy. I mean, like, Kittle sort of annoys me, like, even though I really like him as a player, because I mean, in the SuperFan Super Mock draft, I loved him when we were like doing that draft prep. I drafted him in like the third round in their fake draft, and it pissed me off that he fell to you guys in the fifth in the real draft, because I would have loved for the Chiefs to have drafted Kittle. I mean, if you can imagine like Kittle and Kelce on the same team, would be ridiculous.
Oh, God,
but anyway,
yeah.
The two-way tight end, like Kittle is very much in like the Gronkowski mold of that. He's just as plus of a player as a blocker as he is as a receiver, which is great schematically. But what Kelce does, I mean, he is basically a number one wide receiver at the tight end position. He's the first tight end ever to have 4 straight 1,000-plus yard seasons. Granted, Kittle's had the last 2 is that, so Kittle may catch up to him at some point, so maybe a little race here. The craziest thing, and I think, when we talk about, everyone talks about Mahomes and his, how much of this is Mahomes, how much of this is surrounding cast, how much of this is Reed. One of the craziest things that has started happening like mid last season, and it started happening more and more in games recently, is not only, do the Chiefs do so much misdirection pre-play, but they that like Mahomes will break out of the pocket and go scramble drill and receivers will break off the routes at that point. But more and more often now, and even starting at the beginning of the season, veteran receivers, especially Kelce, have just been like they'll start their route, they read the defense, and they'll just go to space. Kelce played quarterback in like college and high school, and so a few steps into his route, he can see what the defense is. And more often than not, especially now that he and Mahomes are basically like jazz musicians, both playing different instruments, and they will just like, we need to do a key change, and they will just do it without either of them communicating to each other. Like there are several NFL films actually caught this a bit, like where frequently you'll see Kelce is running one route, and then he just sees where the safeties are sitting or where the linebackers are. Oh, this is cover 3. Okay, that means the spot's going to be here, and he'll just break off his route and go there. And before he's even turned his head, the ball is already on the way to that spot because Mahomes knows that Kelce knows that, and that will just throw it to a spot, assuming that Kelce's going to read it the same way and go there. And there was actually, they caught a moment on the sidelines where like Kelce was saying like, how did you know I was going to do that? I literally gave zero indication that I was going there. And yet I turned around and the ball's already there. And Mahomes was like, well, that's where I wanted you to go. So I just threw it to that spot hoping you would figure it out and go there. And that's happened so many times. And that I think is part of the indefensible part of this Chiefs offense, where Tyreek Hill especially and Travis Kelce especially, those are the two guys that kind of have the mind meld with Mahomes, where there's almost 3 plays happening on every play. There's the misdirection, which both Shanahan and Reed use a lot. There's whatever the look is, then there's what actually happens, and then there's improvisation that happens then after, where both Mahomes and the receivers are just like doing their thing. And that's what I think makes this defense, or this offense rather, next level. But on the other hand, I mean, San Francisco is, they're number 2 in DVOA this year. They came up from, being something like 25, I think, last year. And you got guys, veteran dudes like Sherman back there who can sniff stuff out. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I imagine there's a lot of conversation. I imagine as a 49ers fan, you're tired of hearing about Mahomes. How do you see that all working in terms of shutting him down?
Well, you see, I may be tired of hearing about Mahomes, but it's not because he doesn't deserve it. You stated indefensible, and really, I think that's the perfect way to say. The Chiefs are going to get theirs. Like there's not much the Niners are going to be able to do to shut them down. So Kelsey, Hill, Watkins. I don't know what you do there. And then you got the speed of the running game. The Niners definitely are one of the worst teams against the screen. If you want to see an example of that, watch either one of those Arizona games where Kenyon Drake looked like he was back at Oregon and went off for almost 200 yards each game. And so he did the same thing versus Seahawks. So, I mean, it can happen. The Niners, especially going to Richard Sherman, he is not typically going to get beat deep. And yeah, Hill is way faster. Watkins is faster. They're all going to be faster than Sherman. But Sherman will stay over the top. Even when we played in 2018, when Sherman was a shell of himself in week 3, he made some really good plays on Hill when he was going to get beat deep on one. I was able to recover and make a PBU. But the Chiefs are going to have the comeback route and the quick out all day long. All day long. Will Andy Reid and Mahomes just sit back and take it? Or are they going to live for that big play that has absolutely been a staple of their offense? Not very often do you see double-digit play drives by the Chiefs. And so if the Niners can get pressure on Mahomes, even if they don't get sacks, because Mahomes does not give up a lot of sacks. If they can get pressure on him and make him uncertain on the read he's seeing, while still covering deep, it's going to be a long day. But I feel like the Chiefs are going to come out strong. They're going to score points in the first quarter. They're going to try to get the Niners out of the running game by playing offense. And the Niners got to be ready to weather that storm. But I still see the Chiefs coming up, getting up early on them.
Yeah, and that's what's been so fascinating, too, is that I think, for all the talk about how different these two teams are, as we mentioned, there's certain similar things that both the offenses do, and that I think also the defenses are built to be best when playing with a lead. And the 49ers have never trailed in either of the two postseason games this season, whereas the Chiefs have been down 24-0 and 10-0 in each of theirs, and have come right back in it. I think honestly, special teams is going to be a huge part of this, which is something that also no one really talks about. I mean, part of that's what created the deficit for the Chiefs in that first game against the Texans was 2 big special teams gaps. I don't know. There's so many different ways in this, but do you have a particular X factor you have, like a particular player you think is going to be maybe the less talked about guy that, maybe makes the big impact that turns this thing?
I'm torn between either Jaquiski Tartt or Jimmy Ward, the starting strong safety and free safety. Ward has been an absolute monster for the Niners all year, has yet to record an interception. I feel like he's due. And then on offense, I think it's still going to be a Jimmy G game, and we're not going to. I know that's on an undercover player, but that's not going to be something where a stat line is going to show. I think he's going to make some throws late in this game that, even though his stat line is going to look like crap, and all the national media will say, but every Niner fan is going to say that's what I saw week 2 in Pittsburgh. That's what I saw against him in New Orleans versus the Saints. That's what we saw Jimmy do, make the clutch throws that gets the job done. Quite frankly, 22-5 as a starter, much different team than playing in KC week 3 of 2018. But going undercover, if I'm actually going to give you an undercover guy, I would say Deebo Samuel versus Breland. That will be a good matchup too, because I can see Kittle getting bracketed. I can see Kittle getting taken away. And Deebo Samuel has been a very good route runner lately on end arounds and things like that, and that could swing the game. So long-winded answer there, but those are my 2 guys.
All right. Well, you gave me like 4 players, so I'm going to give you 2. I guess on offense, the big guy that I think doesn't get talked about enough, and if it wasn't such a crazy year for the Chiefs, would be talked about a ton, is Mecole Hardman. Their second round, their first of the 2 second-round picks this year. And he's a guy who I just like. They have just so many weapons. It doesn't surprise me that much, and especially because wide receivers especially tend to come in a little bit slow into Andy Reid's offense because he makes them learn all their positions and all the routes in his very thick playbook. But I mean, McCole Hardman, if you like compare his rookie stats to Tyreek Hill's rookie stats,